Okay, all right. You've landed on Island 49. I'm your host, Weston Smith. It is Sunday, April 28th, just a minute or two after 10 a.m. here on the East Coast, which means the 2024 NFL Draft is in the books. Teams are scouring to sign drafted free agents to complement the roster, go forward, and get some camp, all of those things. So, uh, excited to see how this pans out. Really want to talk a little bit more about what the 49ers have accomplished in the draft. Um, Specifically today, we'll just focus on Thursday and Friday night results. So rounds 1, 3, on 1, 2, and 3. Been a while since we've had a pick in each one of those rounds. So let's come back. Let's talk about it. Get your thoughts. I'll give you mine. We'll go from there. All right, you're on the island. I'm Weston. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, leave comments. If you happen to catch this live, please feel free to chime in. Happy to entertain any element of discussion as it relates to the 2024 NFL Draft. Like we said, already in the books. Today, let's just talk a little bit about rounds 1, 2, and 3 and what that looked like for the 49ers. So before we talk about or discuss the actual picks, let's kind of like recap what you heard a lot and what I said a lot going into this draft is the reality was they needed to walk away with their 10 picks with what I felt was like 2 to 3 immediate contributors to this team to keep that Super Bowl window open. Obviously, there was a lot of turmoil related to like, hey, Brandon Ayuk, is he going to be traded? Are they going to extend him? And then as we got closer to the draft and especially got through the first round, more specifically through the first 20 picks, and that didn't seem like a reality. You knew Brandon was going to stay, and then all of a sudden the talks were like, hey, maybe they'll move on from Deebo. I don't think either one of these players were even close to not being a part of this roster, at least for this season. Next season's an entirely different discussion. I think they're comfortable extending BA. I think they're fine with Deebo's money. They certainly know what he brings to the offense. We all know that the offense suffered in those 3 games that Deebo wasn't able to play last season. So here we are. I think that is win for 49ers coming out of day 1 and day 2 of the NFL draft is that the rumor mill comes to an end around those 2 players. So let's get into the picks. Mocks galore, right? I'm not a big mock draft guy. I try my best to not fall in love with specific draft picks because very rarely do they wind up on my team, right? So just something I watch the prospects, as best I can. I try to watch a lot of college football and keep note of everybody. So I'll be the first to admit if there's a player that I really just didn't know and didn't take the time to view, and then I got to rely on other people's opinions and then go back and check the tape. So round 1, sitting at number 31 overall, my pre-draft prediction was that the 49ers were not going to pick at 31. And boy, was that a long 4 hours before they even got onto the clock to pick. One thing I noticed is that the clock went all the way down before, NFL Network had pick is in. And I don't think that's by design. I do think the 49ers were actively looking to get out of the first round. They just didn't find anything compelling, or at least nobody offered anything compelling enough to make them move out and bypass a player that they might have had pegged at 31. Position types that we talked about, defensive back, potentially addressing the offensive line. At that point in the draft, it was probably going to, from a value perspective, probably going to be more interior offensive line than it was going to be any of the tackles you expected them to go. But the board fell really generous for the 49ers. I mean, you had 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. You had 15 offensive players taken in the first 15 picks. So if you think about addressing the defensive backfield and specifically your corner position, the players to be had were there. The kid from Iowa staring you right in the eyes. Other guys that they were linked to that might have had, like, I don't know, a positional value of like the third or fourth best at their position, or, you know, the number 35 or 40 overall ranked prospect in the draft, et cetera. I know it means very little. It's just talking about the perceived value of that player at that moment when they're being picked. So I, like all of you, was shocked. Well, not shocked that they went wide receiver. I always thought that was a possibility. Shocked at the name Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. Played a couple of years over at Arizona State before transferring to Florida. 6'1", 190 pounds, 4'4", 40 kid. Super athletic, strong kid. 17 bench reps at 225, 42-inch vertical. That's pretty sick, being able to jump that high from a vertical position. Some production at Florida, not the flashiest of numbers. I don't hold that against him. Their offense was anemic. It's very vanilla. He's had poor quarterback play for the last 2 years while I was in Florida. What are the positives? Tremendous athlete. You've seen all the post draft interviews and with him, some fun, some about ball, etc. Just seems like a high character guy. Tremendous hands. We've all seen the highlight of the one-handed catch over the middle where he gets smacked and holds on to it. That's fantastic. But a common theme we're gonna discuss over these first three picks is versatility. So let me just link back real quick to the Deebo Auk thing. Right when the pick came in and it was a wide receiver, I think the moment was that at least presented me, and I'm sure it presented all of you, was like, oh wow, this isn't done yet, right? Like this Auk Deebo thing feels a little bit more real. They know something that we don't. This is going to play into day two. Now we're trying to understand the pick. Again, the player, you know, he's going to get knocked for, some people are going to say, he was like a top 60 prospect, whatever it might be. Just remember that all of that. And I'm not celebrating this pick. I was against addressing this position at this moment in time in the draft if I was the one running the team. I'm just going to talk about what I know about the player. I was fortunate enough that for where I live on the East Coast, Saturdays, Florida's just always on TV, you know? So they're the team that I've always got to see. I've got to see Ricky Pearsall play. He's a tremendous player. Not the guy for me, but going back to the Deebo Auk thing, the more you thought about it, the more that this felt like a Deebo replacement. You see the film, you see the highlights, right? You see, you know, end arounds and jet sweeps and bubbles and what he can do with the ball in his hands, you know, part of that yak squad, if you will. So it felt more like Deebo and the gadget player, wide back, right, versus an Auk replacement. Plus, we were at the end of the first round, right, and all we heard was, you know, they'll never settle for anything less than a high one for Auk based on what he brings to the team. So neither here nor there. They all stay. Ricky Pearsall becomes, you know, a piece of the puzzle. But I question, again, I go back to my statement of like immediate impact players. I understand the philosophy of the draft. I'm not being naive, right? It is for the future. You will pick players that won't contribute right away. Your hope is year 2, year 3 production ramps, and you find ways to get them in now that you know more about that person in your locker room and what they're good at, what they're not good at, etc. And this is a really good team, so it's hard to find those contributors. But again, I'm using my priority picks on folks that I think have upside and can play right away. I'm not sure Ricky fits that build. I mean, I think his skill set does. I think he's older, right? We'll talk about this over the first 3 picks. They'll all be 24 during the 2024 NFL season. That's an old rookie, right? They played a lot of college ball, a lot of experience. All of that lends itself to say he can contribute right out of the gate. I don't discredit that. What I think about is, in following this team and the relationship that Kyle Shanahan tends to have with his wide receivers in their first and second year in this league, it's not always favorable, a la a Brandon Aiyuk falling into the doghouse. We've seen Dante Pettis come and go, right? Like this happens. I wonder, and he doesn't strike me as a guy that's intentionally, from lack of effort or being lackadaisical or missing assignments, that's going to find himself into Kyle's doghouse, but he might. The other thing that I think about is just the way that the the focus of this offense, and the players that they do have. They prioritize retaining Jaan Jennings. I don't think a pick like this just gets Jaan off the field. Very rarely are 49ers in 4 wide receiver sets, right? They run a lot of 2 tight end, a lot of 2 back. They love having the full back on the field. So when you got Kittle's in the lineup, Deebo's in the lineup, Auk's in the lineup, Christian McCaffrey is on the field, Juszczyk's on the field. You go down the list, go to 3 wide receiver set. Well, you can't take Jaan Jennings out of there. I mean, the guy's been nothing but clutch for you. Arguably, if they won the Super Bowl, could have been MVP of the Super Bowl. You put a high price tag on him in the offseason with the intention of retaining him. Like, I don't think Ricky Pearsall just immediately unseats Jaan Jennings. So that's where I'm perplexed. It could fill in the blank. Ricky Pearsall, anybody else at that position just don't, especially with the retention of Auk and Deebo, just doesn't feel like anything's going to happen. Like, I just don't think he's going to get that out there. Didn't link Ricky Pearsall to the 49ers at all. The more you watch about him, the more I understand. And let's just go nip in the butt this perception of value. Here's the reality. Nobody cares. We talked about it multiple times. Most GMs, 15 to 20 players they peg with a first-round pick. 32 picks in the first round. So the latter half of the first round, by pure definition, is not drafting, quote-unquote, first-round talent. So what's the difference here if a guy in your mind is, pick that 31 but rank 59th? If you're the team and you don't pick again until the late 60s, if that's your guy, get your guy. The reality is we all know nothing. Our ranking of players, our evaluation of players is all based on stuff that we made up in our own mind or somebody else's rubric. Like, I hate this notion of winners and losers of a draft or a scenario, because it's being presented to you. I understand its content, but it's being presented to you by somebody who we're not judging their work, and they're here judging somebody else's work. Like Mel Kiper. Like, I grew up listening to Mel Kiper. Unfortunately, it's not part of, who I lean on in this day and age. But like, if you go back and you look at his first round, and I understand the draft is very tricky business, but let's just be fair about this, right? Like, you're saying this guy is not good value. Okay, based on your thoughts, right? You can always find a stat. You can always find a highlight clip. You can always find something that's going to say, look at this guy. Look how good he is, or look how poor he is. You can skew it any different way. But like, if I use these draft pundits as an example, and I don't mean to pick on Mel, guy's been doing it forever. But if you look at a success rate in the first round, it's like 20%, sub 20% in terms of picking the right player to the right team. It's tricky business. I understand its content. I understand we consume it. The dislike of this pick, for me, is not the player. It's just, and it's not even necessarily, it's the position that we're addressing, right? I thought there was more pressing needs that would immediately make this team better, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, when inevitably there's going to be new wrinkles to this scheme. One of those guys, I was just very high on the kid of the corner from Iowa, on Cooper. I just really enjoyed his tape, thought he fit, personality, stylistically, a lot about like how the defense wants to carry themselves and represent themselves. I thought he fit in great with Demo and Ward. So, like, again, this is why I try not to fall in love with people. Certainly some disappointment there, but if I'm being dead serious, like, I don't love the position that's addressed in this particular pick. That's just my thought. That's my sentiment on it all. But like the player, see the fit, getting this feeling that Shanahan's kind of saying, F it. We were averaging 30 a game last year. I want to average 35, right? We'll all talk about how the 49ers, the wide receivers were costly in the Super Bowl because they couldn't get separation from the press man coverage of the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe this is their answer. Hey, things would have been differently. I don't know. I'm not putting that game on the wide receiver. It could have gone so many different ways. But again, plus athlete, great character, great hands. And oh, by the way, while we're out here dispelling what I like and dislike, hate the term. It sounds great, but hate the term great hands. Your hands actually have nothing to do with it. It really should be great concentration. Coincidentally, all the ones who make ridiculous catches and don't drop anything. It's because they're just laser focused and they're concentrated. They don't take their eye off the ball. They do all of the right things fundamentally. So for me, Ricky Pearsall defines great concentration, which equates to displaying tremendous hands as a wide receiver, which is clearly important. So I'm excited to see him on the field. I love to see what new wrinkle this presents, and especially the way Deebo plays. If he is nicked up or a week or two, and this is a guy that can allow Kyle to have continuity in the game plan because that one player might be missing, then I think it bodes well. And he probably represents Deebo better than a lot of the other people, on day one or day two of the draft. So there we are. Ricky Pearsall, like the player, don't love the pick or the positional value taken right there. And again, I'm being cautiously optimistic because I just don't know if this guy really breaks the field early often. Everybody's talking about his special teams contribution. You didn't see a lot of it. A little bit, enough to say that, like, hey, they'll probably work it out or, give him some reps to crack the 53 as a punt returner, kick returner, in the absence of Ray McLeod. So we'll see. Again, Ricky Pearsall, welcome to the 49ers. See how it goes. Round 2, number 64 overall, position of value to me, right? The cornerback position, Renardo Green, 6 foot, 186 pounds. 4'9" guy, 37.5-inch vertical. So again, another plus athlete, had 13 pass breakups in the 2023 season. Going back to the common term here, versatility. Has experience at cornerback and safety at FSU. It's actually funny to me because Florida and Florida State, again, based on where I live, they're always televised. I see a lot of their games. So I've seen these guys play. I didn't have any one of them linked to the San Francisco 49ers when I'm connecting my dots and just kind of thinking about my team and draft needs and where they might go. But he's a good, aggressive player. I think this, to me, again, another one where some people will say, oh, that's just too high. I had him, as a 3rd or 4th round, pick. And then we know, who was it? I think it was Louis Riddick who said that this was the best press man DB in the draft. And we all know, what's called on the field in college is drastically different than the NFL. He is handsy. He grabs. He's not going to get away with all of that. Young, another 24-year-old, but still a young kid. You like to think you can coach that out of him, but keep that swag, keep that dog in him, keep him right up to the line. But I think to really judge this pick, it's going to come down to how the 49ers are going to utilize him, because we've seen this story before. So what I mean, are you going to let this guy do what he has done well that probably attracted you to him in the first place, a press cover man? Or are you going to make him play off the ball? Are you going to put him in the slot? Does he line up outside? I think it all depends. I think the press coverage is his strength. You play him off, a la Ambry Thomas, who played a lot of press man at Michigan and then started to play off. How's that panning out for the 49ers? Not so great. That's why we're in the position here of being excited or not over Renardo Green coming to the San Francisco 49ers. Here's my questions related to this particular pick when it was made. Now, I love addressing this position. Wish they did it in the first round. In fact, I wish I could almost switch these two in some capacity, right? Was there a receiver at 64? Would Ricky Pearsall have been there at 64? And who you draft at corner looks a little bit different, neither here nor there. Little surprised they went corner at this point, because, again, I thought the biggest need was contribution to the offensive line in some. And what's more mind-boggling is they trade back with Kansas City for Kansas City to get in front of them to take a tackle that had been linked to the 49ers. Doesn't mean that's true, but have been linked to the 49ers a tremendous amount in the offseason. A tackle that was linked to the Kansas City Chiefs as their first-round draft pick. And they end up getting them in, the second to last pick in the second round. Great value for them. But these are the things that I'm like, what, you're traded out with them? The team that's beat you twice in the Super Bowl, and you let them get up to get a guy that they want. Now, here's where like you have to investigate this a little bit. If the team is looking to jump you one pick, it is prudent to ask, who are you picking? Right? And I know that's happened. And I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs told them, we're taking the tackle from BYU. And I'm sure the 49ers are like, okay, no problem. Leads us to believe that, again, they still think that their offensive line is in good shape, different than how we view it. I disagree with that. I think they not only do they need help right now, I think they're going to need help in the future, because once that number 71 hangs it up, I would say this offensive line is in a lot of trouble, and you're going to be scrambling to protect who you soon will be your $35 to $40 million a year quarterback. So that's what gave me heartache over the pick when it happened. If we're talking just about the pick and what Renardo Green's going to contribute to the 49ers, that's what I want to do. These picks are made. I'm not crying over spilt milk. Let's just call it what it is. Are they going to contribute or not? And when can we expect that contribution to come to fruition, right? Like immediately, midway through the season, end of next year, whatever it might be. I do think Renardo's got a better shot of cracking the lineup. It's all going to be about health of the DB room. The DB room is real deep, right? So you have Mooney Ward, Demo, Ambry Thomas, Yidim, Rock Ya-Sin, Samuel Womack, Darrell Luter, the Lucas kid that you just brought over from Detroit. So a lot of crowded room. I think Renardo Green's got a real chance to jump into the top 3 or 4 on the depth chart. I think the one thing that has done a lot of favors for him is we've all seen it, the film of him essentially shutting down Malik Neighbors, who was the number 6 overall pick in this draft, and the second wide receiver to come off the board. Many argued he was the best wide receiver in this draft class. And Renardo Green, for all intents and purposes, took him out of the game, along with his receiving counterpart from LSU that went in the back half of the first round. So guy's got good tape. He's physical, a little bit longer, right? Like longer arms. He's not the tallest guy, but like physical, super competitive, plus athlete. So all that bodes well for the position. And by the way, shout out to Eric Crocker, because he's the one who presented the argument about like how to utilize Renardo Green. So something I was thinking, like, where does he fit in? And then that's kind of Crocker's report kind of like connected the dots for me. That's it. Because like, where have I seen this before? That's right, Ambry Thomas, right? Like somebody who they were high on, 3rd round pick, played a lot of press man, and all of a sudden we got him 8-9 yards off the wide receiver, and he's not playing his most effective ball. So there you are, number 64 overall, Renardo Green. That's the 2nd round pick. Final pick here. Again, I'm just talking about Thursday and Friday night's results. So our first 3 picks, we'll talk a lot about rounds 4 through 7 and undrafted free agents. I'm sure that'll be the focal point of Steph's show tomorrow evening when I join her. Even if we don't get all the way through it, I'll be back and pull apart. So some of these players I just want to look into a little bit more and make my own assessment about when, where, what we gave up, etc. So final pick here, number 86 overall. 49ers actually traded up to get to the 86 slot to pick Dominic Puny, 6'5", 313-pound offensive lineman, played at Kansas. Another guy, like I said, 24 years old. Admittedly, I had to go do my research. Don't watch a lot of Kansas Jayhawk football, just being honest about it. A lot of people that I respect in this industry, I've seen favorable and positive things. Brad Graham's one of those guys. He loves evaluating the offensive line, and he was enamored with this pick. He had talked about Puny throughout the process and somebody that he thought fit what the 49ers do. And after watching a little bit of tape and just reading up and looking at the experience, like on paper, I have to agree. Back to that term, versatility. He's got experience at tackle, guard, center, probably projects as a guard or a center in the NFL. But this is the kind of guy that the 49ers have shown that they valued in the past, a la Daniel Brunskill, a guy who could just fill in a pinch up and down the line. That's going to get him on the 53, and that's going to get him early. So this might be the player that I was talking about from a contribution perspective, because an injury here, an injury there might get him in. Somebody just banged up might get him in. He might get his opportunity to shine and never look back and perhaps that's an improvement at that particular position, i.e., an immediate contributor. So back to the Renardo Green, again, somebody who's going to have to work. Like, he's not stenciled in day one starter at any of those positions. He's got to compete. Same with Ricky Pearsall. Same here with Dominic Puny. But I think he's more likely to get an early crack at time and show that he can be an upgrade over another Senior Bowl guy. They love these Senior Bowl guys. Lot of experience. I think what was it? Started 40 something game. It's a lot of college ball. So that's like, to me, it almost seems like there's a shift in the mentality of the 49ers, and it looks a lot like it's off the success of Brock Purdy and some other players, where I want guys who played ball, a lot of ball. I don't want one-hit wonders. This reminds me of the old Bill Parcells philosophy. It's almost like an old school football mentality. Parcells was adamant he would never draft a quarterback that didn't at least start for at least 3 years in college and have that level of experience under the belt. Wouldn't even entertain it. Everything comes from experience, right? Knowledge gained, tips, tricks, whatever it is, all comes from playing. One thing I can say about Puny, Pearsall, and Green, they've all played a lot of football. And in fact, spoiler alert, there's a couple guys that they picked later in the draft, same thing. Played a lot of football and don't tend to miss time. So again, I'm saying that I was not familiar with Dominic Puny's game. Took some time, had to put in the work to learn a little bit more about him. Relied on some of my peers to understand a little bit more about like their thoughts on him. But 49er fans, let's not get confused. All football fans, let's not get confused. It's very easy for us to come out of the draft. I have text messages up and down my phone from 49ers fans going, love the pick, love the pick, love the pick, love the pick. Oh, love this guy, stud. Well, guys, if we hit a home run like you define on every one of these draft picks, we'd be four-peating the Super Bowl right now, right? That's not the reality. I know we want to get ourselves hyped and get ourselves psyched for players and what they might mean to the team now and in the future. But the truth is, us, the draft pundits, everybody out there, we don't know anything until these guys hit the field. There are NFL players who are far better in the most competitive of leagues than they were collegiate players. It just happens. They right opportunity, right coach. They mature and blossom as like adults and take their craft even more seriously. There's so many things that contribute into this. The reality is we know nothing, right? We know nothing. So we could sit here. I say don't grade a draft based on 3 days after the draft, right? Like, I would say right now we're in going into the 2024 season. Now would be an ample time to turn around and say, like, let's grade the 2020 and 2021 drafts for the San Francisco 49ers and for other teams. Let's see who's under contract, who might got a 5th-year, extension, etc. Right? Like, who's contributing? What does that contribution look like 2, 3, 4 years from now? That's how you judge it. And you've heard this, like John Lynch talk about it with Trey Lance. Like, they still think his best ball is ahead of him. So it has to get an opportunity, and it just wasn't with the team that drafted him. Funny things happen. Let me wrap this up, though. The reality is, I hope I'm being clear about this. I am disappointed with, if I was a general manager of the San Francisco 49ers and these were my 3 picks, just based on what was addressed. Now, granted, they're going to tell you that, like, hey, arguably offensive line, wide receiver, and corner were the 3 biggest positions of needs. Sure. I would have just done it differently based on the players that were available when I was picking, It's fine. I'll eat my words or I'll take my victory lap. I just didn't love it. I like the first 2 players. I've seen them. I can attest to them. I just don't know if they were right for us at that moment in time. I would have done things differently, but time will tell. I'm sure they'll have an impact, but I'm going to go back and, like I said, and this is what I am going to judge the 49ers 2024 draft on, is at the end of the season, were there 3 guys that helped them be a better football team or contributed in 2024? If the answer is no, then I don't think this was a good draft for the 49ers. That being said, I did give my own grade for the first 3 rounds, right? So Thursday and Friday night, I'm giving it a B- overall. Again, they did address positions of need. I would have done it differently. I probably would be looking at different players, but I got to give them credit for that. And then digging into the 3 and having a couple days to do that, you learn a little bit more about them. Doesn't change my perception of like the value of the position and when it was picked and is which need was greater than the others. I can see why these are the 3 players, right? I understand. I feel like they align very well with what the 49ers want in their locker room, what these players contribute schematically. So I get it. I totally get it. But that's it. Like I said, be back tomorrow night with Steph. Hopefully, I'm sure we'll be recapping the draft and maybe belaboring some points on these top 3 guys. But I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time focusing on the back half of the draft too, where the 49ers, I think, ended up with 5 more picks because they did made some trades. And if not, I'll be back during the week to talk about a couple of those players, specifically the running back and the wide receiver. Those individuals intrigue me a little bit, and I think this is where I think Kyle's going for the goal. But this is Island 49. I'm Weston Smith. Please, when you see this go live, like, subscribe, tell your friends. No, I'm just kidding. Comment. Like I'll sit here and talk for hours, but I'd love to literally get your thoughts, your feedback. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I'm not. Tell me you agree. Ask a question. I'll give me an opinion. I'm bold about this. I tell you, I'm just a fan like y'all. Maybe a little fanatical and how I detail and watch this team and what Sundays look like in this house and what the NFL does to this family. But I'm a fan. I don't have sources. Don't want sources. I don't want to cloud my judgment. I want to be a fan. Rooting for the 49ers as much as it pains me and kills me and stresses me out time and time again. That is part of the sex appeal, and I don't want that to ever change. This is Island 49. I'm Weston Smith. Like, subscribe. Catch you on the other side.